Hello, my name is Kaze and welcome to another episode of Kaze Labs. So what did the cat drag in today? Well, it looks like a Korg DW-6000. Personally, I think that this is one of the most underrated keyboards from the mid-80s. I think it sounds fantastic. It's great for like pads, bass lines, sequence, arpeggiated lines. I think it's a great sounding synth, and if you keep your eyes open, you could probably find one for a really, really great price. Now, the person that sold it to me said that it doesn't work. And if I hook it up to power and try to switch it on, nothing happens. So we're gonna open it up, take a look inside and see if we can figure out what exactly might be going on with it. Now, word of warning as always, we're gonna be dealing with live electricity that can kill you. We're gonna be dealing with like very delicate electronic components. So if you're following along and you are not comfortable around those things, it's probably best that you seek the help of a professional. Having said that, let's dive in and figure out what might be going on with this Korg DW-6000. I'm just kind of taking a quick look on the exterior just to kind of get a sense of what is going on with this keyboard. So first thing, of course, this is like a very common sort of thing to happen, but the little plastic knob on the joystick is missing. That is like a fairly common sort of thing to happen on these keyboards. The sliders feel fairly smooth, so I'm not sensing any grunge. All the buttons are here, so that's kind of nice. Once I get the keyboard to turn on, I'm gonna have to like kind of check the buttons, and some of the buttons might need to be replaced. Other than that, like the case is in pretty decent condition. There's some scuff marks, like right here. There's like some little kind of blemishes in the plastic. I'm mostly kind of seeing it on this side where the little silk screen is kind of missing. There's this stuff here. To me, it looks like somebody had, like maybe there was some gunk or stickers or something on it at some point, and somebody had tried to maybe kind of like polish it off and not very successfully. The keyboard actually looks like in pretty decent shape. I don't know if it works, but aesthetically, the keys look pretty good, and one of the things that I always check is to see if the bottom of the keys are broken off. Ooh, here's a biggie. Yeah, so there's like a pretty big chunk of plastic missing on the top case, so that's not great, especially because it's not going to be easy to push that up. The side looks fine though, and the sides of the keyboard look pretty decent. All right, just continuing my exterior inspection. The bottom looks pretty good. It's black, so you can't really see much detail. There's some screws missing here. The rubber feet look in pretty decent shape. They need to be cleaned up a little bit, but overall it looks pretty decent. You can kind of tell somebody's worked on this keyboard, so it's always like a bit of a surprise until I get to open it and take a look inside and just see a little bit what the condition of the circuit boards are. All right, and here we go. This is what a DW-6000 looks like from the inside. So there's a few things. There's like a decent amount of rust here, which kind of makes me wonder if maybe there was some liquid that got spilled. There's definitely like some corrosion on the bottom of the keyboard. Aside from that, I don't know if this is like a user modification or what, but this looks interesting. I'm gonna have to research it because I have another DW-6000 that definitely does not have this, so maybe this is like a factory modification. Usually they have like a little bit of a different set of chips here, but I'll check it out. Aside from that, one of the nice things that I always check for is that none of the chips are missing, because sometimes people take some of these boards and end up just kind of swapping out the chips with other boards to get like other boards to work, and it's always kind of messy. Continuing my little quick visual inspection. Here's the power supply. This is the power transforming circuit. Well, I guess that's the transformer. It's like kind of like the power supply circuit. And here's like the fuse and all this other stuff. Here is the battery. This is like soldered right on the board, which is always kind of like puzzled me why Korg did this as opposed to just putting like a very inexpensive battery holder that would make replacing the battery a lot easier. So I'm going to check for that. Let's see here. This is the firmware, and here's another thing that I'm not familiar with. So I'm gonna have to like check on these two chips because I don't recognize them. Other than that, like on the top side, the joystick is a little loose in its track. I'm gonna have to like check the springs and stuff. It looks like maybe like one of the springs is missing, and that's why it's kind of leaning this way. The bottom of the keyboard looks good. Like the felt actually looks in pretty good shape. It's nice and clean and white. And then you have like the various circuit boards for the buttons and sliders up there, which control the functionality of the synth. And last but not least, this module right here is the analog chorus that's built into the keyboard as well. So far so good. I mean, I'm not seeing anything that looks terribly awful. I don't see screws missing, at least not too much. No, like sometimes these boards have like little holes, but there's not like a post behind, so that's not necessarily a missing screw. It's always good to look if some of these screws are missing, just because of the fact that means that somebody removed the boards and worked on them. But I mean, overall, the top side looks pretty clean. Very clean, as a matter of fact, I would say. And the bottom, you know, there's a little bit of grunge here on some of the surfaces, and as I said, these rust spots. Last but not least, the thing to check for is capacitors for the power supply, but they look like in pretty decent shape, honestly. I know that like one of the first things that a lot of people do is just replace all these capacitors, but to me, that's not always necessary, not at least until I'm able to get in here and check the voltage, you know, just kind of start seeing a little bit like what voltage this guy's outputting. And if the voltage that comes out of the various pins is the right voltage, I personally don't think that there's a need to recap any of this stuff. I would only do that if the voltage coming from these outputs is looking funky. So that's what I'll check on next. Okay, so I figure out on the W6000 that what I really need to do is just kind of hook it up to some power and see what is coming out of the power supply, just to kind of see how the voltages are sitting. However, I realized that there's like a bit of an issue here. And the issue is that Korg used two-pronged connectors, and I don't have a power cable that actually kind of fits this type of connector. What I do have is this type of connector. This is kind of sort of like what you would expect to find on most modern electronic sort of supplies. I've done this before and it kind of fits, and I know that there's some purists that will kind of say, oh no, you should leave it with the original outlet for the power because, you know, that's what Korg intended. And I'm like, you know what? I don't care. What's authentic about this synth is the sounds and not necessarily how you hook it up to power. So by just simply replacing the little socket, I'm able to just kind of use these standard cables, which is a lot nicer because then I don't have to worry about having a special custom cable just for this keyboard. I'll show you real quick what I did. I mean, the installation is like really, really simple. I mean, basically I unsoldered these two wires from these prongs and resoldered them into these other prongs. And what I tend to do also is put shrink tubing to kind of keep it more isolated, mostly because this is kind of dangerous. I mean, if you have power running into the synth and these things are bare and you touch them, that's bad news. And I also am putting like some heat shrink tubing on the ground, even though it really shouldn't make any difference, but prefer to have it a little bit neater like that. Some people have suggested actually kind of like wiring this guy to the metal chassis right here. I'd rather not do it because Korg didn't seem to think that it was necessary to begin with, so I would much prefer to keep things as close as possible to the way they were with these two-prong things with no ground. I want to test a little bit what's coming out of the power supply. So this is the power supply. I mean, we have like 2 large capacitor and a handful of like small ones, and then these guys down here are the power, the voltage regulators, and you know, those are responsible for converting whatever's coming out from the transformer into plus minus 5, I think plus minus 7 and 11 volts. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just simply going to disconnect these guys from the rest of the keyboard so that if there is the wrong voltage coming out, I'm not risking damaging the circuit boards, because I don't really know what to expect. So I'm just kind of unplugging everything, and I have like a little multimeter here that I'm going to be testing the voltage with. All right, so I have my handy dandy technical or service manual, I should say, that basically matches the schematic of this particular board, which is the power supply is called 660-1. I don't think the -1 is important, but the 660 is. So this is going to be able to allow me to know what to look for. And right off the bat, I can see from the service technical manual that this first pin here is going to be the ground, and then the various voltages are going to be coming out of the other pins. Okay, so the keyboard is hooked up. I'm going to switch it on from the back. So let's start with the first set of 4 pins here. We have ground, -5, +5, and +11. So I'm just going to put this guy on the ground pin, and I'm going to touch this guy right here. And that gives me -5, that is correct. So that's a good sign. And it's pretty accurate, actually. The next one should be +5. So this is like 5.1 volts, but that's still within spec. And then the last one, it's telling me that it should be like +11 volts. So I'm just gonna touch on that, and it gives me like 15, almost like 15 and a half, if you guys can see that. This is a little high, but keep in mind that these guys are not sending current to the rest of the boards. So that should be okay. And plus, I believe that the 11 volts supply is not a regulated supply, so it's not going through like any of these regulators. So because of that, it's just essentially coming out of the transformer and kind of being converted, you know, like, so it's not really super exact. And I think Korg is okay with that. The next row right here, that is going to be ground, -5, +5, -7, and then +5 and +11. So let's test this guy. So here we have -5, so that is correct. The next one should be +5. So once again, we have that 5.1, but we're still very much within spec. The next one should be -7. And it is, look at that, it's very, very accurate. And the last one should be like +11. Let me see here, it's giving me like a +5. Oh, I'm sorry, I misread it. It is supposed to be +5. So this is correct. There is a +11 rail, but it's not coming out of these guys. All right, the very next one, we are dealing with, once again, ground, -5, +5, and +11. So it should be like the same as this guy. So ground, -5, correct. +5.1, correct. And this one I'm expecting to be as high as the other one. So it was 15 and a half. Okay. And last but not least, we have this teeny tiny one. I don't know if you guys can see it. It's going to be really tricky for me to kind of get in there. And that's supposed to be ground, +5. Then it's got like a +0.6 volts. And then +11, which once again, I'm expecting it to be like +15. So starting out with the ground. So ground, let's see. +5, 5.1, which is consistent with the other ones. Then we have this plus or minus 0.6 volts. So it's -0.5, it's close. And then the last one is +11, which, as I said, I'm expecting it to be like the 15 and a half. And sure enough, there it is. Okay. So with the power supply working, the next logical step is to connect everything and turn the keyboard on and see what happens. And hopefully when I flick the switch, these lights, this display should come on. Some other kind of LED lights should be popping up here, and hopefully there's sound coming out. So let's try it. Here goes nothing. And nothing it is. There's nothing on the displays. There's no LEDs turning on or off. So it's dead. Now I did plug a set of headphones in here, and I'm getting like this really strange, it's almost like a sweeping tone. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to hear it because the volume is pretty low. Basically what it is, it's like this kind of sweep of frequency that seems to start really high and then just kind of goes really low over maybe about like 30 seconds or so. So this is not good. Okay, so based on what is happening so far, this is not great. Looking at the circuit boards, I mean the top circuits board look really clean to me. I mean they unless there's something like disconnected from this display on this side, which I should check for, it doesn't appear like that the fault would be somewhere in here. These boards, however, on the bottom are kind of like a different story. You can kind of see that there's like some rust spots, which kind of tells me that like at some point like there was spillage, so that might have caused some issue. I mean, I can kind of see some kind of slight corrosions around like some of the chips, so I might have to you know, try to kind of clean it out as best as possible and see if that improves the problem. Now, one of the things that I did not do that I should have done almost right away is to check the memory battery, and that would be like this guy right here. And the thing with the memory battery is like sometimes on these keyboards, even though you wouldn't think so, can actually affect the entire functionality of the keyboard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring out my voltage meter real quick and take a look. Yeah, I don't know if you guys can see it, but it's 3.06. So the battery is actually like in pretty good shape. Just because this battery is working, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's properly connected. I mean, it's possible that there could be like something loose on the underside that might be causing it not to actually kind of send the voltage into the circuit. The other thing that I am, you know, potentially kind of like thinking could be a culprit here is that there are like these two, I think like this is like the firmware chips. And for some reason, these two guys from time to time tend to get corrupted. And once again, I don't really know if that's what's happening. Sometimes kind of like popping them out and reseating them can fix some issues, but that is definitely like another point, like another weak point. Okay, so I pulled these guys out. One of the things that's been suggested that is handy to do is if you have like a pencil with an eraser, is just kind of like go through and clean out the legs, because sometimes these things are not making the proper contact. I am a little bit suspicious of the sockets as well, but you know, it's just kind of, this is a process of elimination. It's just kind of trying to get to the bottom of what is not working and why this guy is just DOA as far as we're concerned. Okay, so I'm not really expecting this to work. It would be a long shot if just kind of, but I mean, you know, I pulled them out, reseated them. Let's turn it on and see a little bit what happens. And we're kind of back to square one here, still no activity. You can hear the sound on the headphones. It's not happy. This is not a happy keyboard. I do have like a secret weapon in my toolbox, and that is I actually have a working version of this very keyboard. So if worse comes to worse, I can actually kind of swap out different circuit boards, because I know that that one works, and kind of try to at least narrow down a little bit, like, you know, like if it's like a voice thing, if it's like a CPU thing, or some other kind of components, and like hopefully that will kind of help a little bit. One of the things that I would like to do is to actually kind of go through and reseat all of these connectors, just to kind of make sure that, you know, maybe kind of spray a little bit of the oxid on it, and, you know, and make sure that I can actually kind of eliminate, you know, a potential kind of fault on that. The other thing I want to do is I do want to remove this board and look what's going on underneath with this battery, because I have a bit of a suspicion that maybe like some of the soldering with this battery is cracked. Also, I really dislike this mounting bracket. There's just 4 little screws that are attaching this guy. I'm probably gonna have to disconnect some of these wires because I don't think I can kind of like flip it. One of the things that I highly recommend, and I cannot stress this enough, is take photos of everything, just because of the fact that as you start plugging and unplugging things, you'd be surprised how easy it is to kind of maybe get some of these guys mixed up. So I always kind of highly recommend that you take photos of everything, so that you can kind of refer to the photos and make sure that you know, whatever you disconnect, you know exactly where it's going to go. So let's see, I'm going to start from this guy. Maybe I should have disconnected it before actually unscrewing the board. Okay, so here's something kind of interesting that I don't know if you guys can see. There appears to be like a resistor being placed in between a couple components here. I mean, I don't know if this is kind of supposed to be from the factory. I'm gonna have to like check my other keyboard just to see. I mean, this might have been like kind of like a little update, but it's weird. But I mean, it seems to be well done. They put like some rubber tubing around it to kind of isolate it and make sure that it's not accidentally touching on something else. These I don't know if you guys can see, but this is where the battery is on the back side, and it's like these 3 pins. So actually they kind of look pretty good, so maybe the battery is not at fault here. They want that hype shit. Okay, so this is what I did. I took out the old battery and I wanted to put a new battery in, and when I went in there and desoldered this old one, it just seemed really stupid not to go ahead and have like a proper battery holder. Right now this is kind of like a bit of like a temporary, you know, solution right here, but I mean, I have like a brand new battery in there. It's reading like about like 3.2 volts going in, and because like this guy has like 2 positive pins, I just use like 2 positive wires to go like to these 2 guys, and the negative that's going here. I don't think this is going to do much of a difference, but you know, it needs to be done anyway. And I thought, well, you know, let me just kind of wire it up so that eventually, like, hopefully, keeping my fingers crossed, when I get this keyboard fully working, you know, this is not something I'm gonna have to worry about. The top of the board is really filthy. I mean, you guys, I don't know if you can kind of see it, but like, it's just, as I said, like at some point I suspect like somebody spilled some liquids, so I try to clean it the best as possible. It's not great, but I don't know, it's just gonna have to do. Okay, so here goes nothing, part 3. As I said, I seriously doubt that this battery is gonna make any difference, and it doesn't. Okay, so while I was at it, I also unhooked this board. This is like the top board of the keyboard where like the displays are. Mostly I was just kind of seeing like to see if like maybe something was disconnected here or came loose. But once again, I mean, anything that's like on the top of this keyboard looks pretty damn good. I mean, it's clean. I mean, you know, relatively speaking, but I mean, for being like, you know, a 40-year-old piece of gear, I mean, this is remarkably clean, and it doesn't look like it got any damage. So I don't think the problem lies here. Okay, so don't get too excited. This is my working DW-6000. So this guy is functioning at 100%, unlike this guy that right now is a bit of a mess. So this is kind of like cool because it gives me the ability to kind of compare the 2 machines and to kind of see if maybe there's like something visible between, you know, between the one that's working and this one that it's obviously not functioning. So let's let me kind of switch it off, unplug it for a second here, and what I'm gonna do is let's open it up and take a look. Okay, so I opened up, like, this is the working unit. This is the one that doesn't work. I apologize for, I only have like one work light, so it's a little bit tricky to kind of get good lighting on both, but I'm gonna try. So one of the first things that I was kind of wondering about on this guy is that some of the things are not populated. For instance, like this section right here just doesn't have anything, and it's good to know that my working one is the same way. Like there's nothing here, so so this is normal. The other thing that I had like a bit of a question about is when I removed the battery, I kind of noticed, I don't know if you guys can see, but there is also like what appears to be like an electrolytic capacitor that's not there. Like here's this C23, looks like maybe a resistor or something was supposed to go in there, maybe a diode, or actually a capacitor, I'm sorry, because it's like a C. Like little things like that kind of got me a little bit curious of like, is there something going on with this board that's missing some components? Somebody for some reason took them out. However, when I come to the working unit, once again, I apologize for the lack of light, but you can see here that capacitor is missing, and same thing here, like this C29 is missing. So so okay, so far, like at least like kind of visually, this appears to be indeed like the same as the non-working one. Okay, so the other thing I was kind of curious to check about is the presence of this resistor that is placed here at the bottom of this board, and I wanted to see, you know, so this would be like in the bottom right corner. I wanted to see like if this is true for this other unit, and I'm not seeing it. So there's definitely like some kind of strangeness about that. I don't know. I mean, it's a bit of a mystery. I don't know. I doubt that that's what's causing the problem, but nonetheless, something to keep in mind that there is a bit of a discrepancy here. What I did is, from this guy, I took out like this circuit board, which is circuit board 653. Okay, so I took this guy out, and I put the same circuit board from my working version in this keyboard. Ah, look at that. We got lights. Okay, I mean, this is potentially a good sign. I'm gonna try to put my headphones next to the microphone here. I'm gonna turn up the volume. Yeah, I hope you guys can hear that, but basically everything works. What that tells me is that there is something that is very wrong with this guy. Whatever is the problem with this keyboard is happening on this 653 circuit board. So I know that the firmware is correct. I mean, I know that this works. Actually, this is still the one from my other keyboard that I just left in here since they both worked. So it's possible that one of those other chips might be malfunctioning, but what I kind of tend to suspect is that maybe some of these traces, I mean, I don't know if you guys can see just how grungy some of this stuff is. I kind of sort of get the feeling that like some of this stuff is like really corroded, really bad. I mean, obviously something like spilled on here and caused this board to just kind of stop working properly. I mean, there's also this kind of weird corrosion on the side of this. So I'm just gonna have to like kind of like slowly test the contacts and see a little bit like if I can kind of narrow down what might be happening. But in the meantime, this is like a really good development. So basically, I was really scared that I was gonna have to like kind of basically just kind of swap out board by board until I narrowed it down to the one that it was problematic. And lo and behold, the very first one that I did, which incidentally I think it's like one of the easiest one to kind of get to, is the one that is a problem. All right, so here's where we're at. Trying to kind of get a game plan here on how I want to approach tackling this board. One of my prime suspects is actually like right here. This entire area just looks in really bad shape. I don't know if you can kind of see it. There's like a lot of corrosion all through here. So kind of like what I want to do is maybe remove this guy, like desolder it from the circuit board and take a look at what's going on underneath. Just to kind of see if there's some missing traces or something that just is not like sending out the signal the way it's supposed to. This was not pleasant, but basically I was able to remove this. I might kind of look up what this chip is and maybe even just kind of get a replacement for this. But I mean, you can kind of see what's underneath. I mean, this is pretty bad. I'm gonna put a socket in there, obviously, so that I can kind of not go through this effort next time. But this is really a mess. I think I'm gonna try to remove these guys. Well, I mean, there's obviously a socket here, so I'm just gonna try to remove the socket and maybe replace it with a different socket, because this socket looks kind of corroded to me as well. So okay, so I got both of these guys removed. What I opted to do with this socket was not pretty, but it works. I mean, basically, on one side I was able to kind of pry it off. On the other side, I just went in there and snipped off the legs, and then kind of carefully removed the part of the legs that were like still stuck in there. So, but I'm glad I did, because I don't know if you guys can see, but it's not looking great underneath there. So this gives me like a really good idea of what's going on, what the traces are supposed to be, and now I can kind of test them and see a little bit if there's something that's disconnected. And then as far as, I mean, obviously the firmware is fine, but this other chip, I'm probably gonna look up online and see if this is something that's available, because I might just kind of go ahead and replace it completely. All right, so I just wanted to pick up where we left off, because actually about 10 days have gone by since I made the last video. And the reason why is because I had to order some parts. Some of the parts that I had to order is actually like these chip sockets that I wanted to change right here on the board. Somebody had either spilled something in this general area, or the battery that used to be in this section right here blew up and maybe kind of spilled a bunch of acid that way. I just kind of meticulously cleaned everything up in here as well as possible, and put in these new sockets that are just higher quality. It's just like a better quality socket. The other thing that I did on this side is there's like two capacitors that I just kind of like desoldered them and then resoldered them back in. They were probably fine to begin with, but I don't know, I just kind of felt like, well, maybe it's a quick little thing that I can kind of do, is like desolder and resolder these two capacitors. And then there were like two resistors here. One is like I think like 47K, the other one is like a 620 ohms. And I replaced the two resistors as well. I mean, once again, like, I mean, I don't think that this is the problem, but I was like, this is like a very, very small little fix that I can kind of do. The only other thing that I did, aside from like just kind of like go with my multimeter and just kind of like test all the connections and make sure that all these traces are in one piece, but honestly, like the circuit board as a whole, except for like this section right here where it's obviously got some corrosion and stuff, as a whole, like I didn't see any like cut traces or anything like that. But if you look on the back, there was these two little contact points from here to here, and they were kind of like a little intermittent for my taste. I mean, they were kind of sort of working, kind of sort of not. So what I did is I just kind of ran like a little cable, like a little wire from one point to the other, you know, that they were supposed to like kind of obviously make contact. And then I just simply kind of wrapped a little bit of electrical tape around it, because when I was soldering the sockets around it, like some of the rubber on the casing melted away. So I was like, well, you know, let's put like some electrical tape so that, you know, I don't have to risk like some sort of like short circuit or anything like that. So I'm gonna put these two chips back in, and then like let's fire up the DW-6000 and see what happens. All right, so I have the board back in, and now is the moment of truth. So everything's hooked up. I'm just gonna switch it on. Yeah, crap. Same problem. Oh my god, this Korg DW-6000 is really, really tricky to fix. But I have a good feeling about it. I think we're on the right path. So please join me in the next part to find out if I can finally bring it back to life. Thank you for watching.